Hello, welcome to a new week, everybody. So we've got a few different things that I'm asking from us this week. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you all. All right. So if we're on our Blackboard page, we see that we've got a few different things under Module 1, Week 3 content, in addition to your literacy narrative, which I hope is going well. If you have questions about that at all, please feel free to reach out. Um, again, if you're stuck on things, please consult me. I still think that your best bet is if you're having a hard time picking a story from your life, um, right? If you feel like there's too many stories to choose from or not enough stories to choose from, then consider one of these prompt ideas. Um, and again, we want to make sure that we're not just like writing a history of our entire lives in 800 words. That's not going to make for a very compelling story, right? That's not going to make for it, or it would make for a compelling story, but maybe just on a bigger, if it was more expansive, right? Like we can't really fit all of our life into just these 2 pages, which is why I'm asking you to focus on some sort of central idea, some sort of central theme, some passion of yours, some major issue from your life, a significant moment from your life, right? And I would again encourage you to consult back in week 2 content the literacy narrative examples, where each of these student examples, you know, did a nice job following one of the prompts and ultimately their A papers. So if that's what you're trying to do, feel free to consult those. So this week we are trudging forward and getting ready for the work we'll be doing with writing project one. I do want to go over the assignment sheet here in a moment, but first we need to introduce this idea of remediation, which is the process that we're going to be undertaking with this story that you're writing. With your literacy narrative, you will be asked to adapt it into a new medium, a new format. So whether you decide, oh, I want to make a podcast out of this, or I want to make a video out of this, I want to make a social media page out of this, whatever you decide, that is the process of remediation. It is quite literally taking a story and remediating it, right? If we're kind of breaking down that word over here. So we're translating a text into a new medium. And why do we do it? Well, of course, it's to share it with new audiences across different genres. We understand, I mean, the most common example of this is books that get turned into movies. We understand, right, that not everyone who reads the book is going to see the movie because they're so dedicated to the original text and they think that they're going to remove a bunch of the characters and remove a bunch of the subplot points, and they don't like who they're casting in the roles. They're different from those they imagined when they were reading the book, and they feel like they're just going to botch the remediation job. And same thing for the opposite, right? Even less people are going to want to read the book version because, quite simply, the movie is easier to engage with. It's easier to watch. It's just 120 minutes. It's not, I have to dedicate X amount of, hours in my day to finish reading this book in the next few weeks. It's a lot more passive. I can just kind of kick back, relax, enjoy the movie. So, yes, we are getting different audiences that are defined by the genre that we're choosing to work within. And so when we decide, hey, this is a great story, I want to adapt it into this new genre, of course, we're thinking about those audiences when we're making those decisions and what to keep in the story, what to change in the story, what new directions to go with the story. And so that's where our heads are at with writing Project One. As you finish your literacy narrative, we're now deciding what genre do I want to work with next? Who are the audiences that are more likely to exist in that genre on that platform? Where is this discourse happening? And how can I use the sort of conventions of this genre to appeal to this audience? So, speaking of that word convention, this is going to be our focus here for the next couple of weeks, because this is really how we're going to measure the success of your project. As we'll discuss, right? You're going to make a podcast, you're going to make a video. Your grade is not going to be based on um, studio quality equipment. Your grade is not going to be based on, wow, that production seems like a lot of money was put towards that, or they're using, just the most expensive tools available to them to do a good job. That's not what your grade is based on. Your grade is going to be based on this idea of your ability to adhere to that genre's conventions. Those things that indicate to an audience, yes, that is this form of media because it's following these conventions, these tropes, these sort of boundaries, right? Um, these roads that this genre has paved, and you have to stay within the lines of these roads for us to consider that a piece of media in that respective genre. So we've kind of already discussed this before. A couple weeks ago, we discussed visual markers when we were talking about the NBA tweet, and we said, well, how do we know this is a tweet? Well, we have the share button right there. We have the like button, the comment button. We have the way that the tweet is oriented. We have the profile picture. All these things we consider visual markers that are, yes, conventions of this genre. That's how we know it's not Instagram. That's how we know it's not a TikTok. Those are the visual markers cueing us. Yes, this is this form of media and not another. And so, yeah, we consider that conventions, but conventions can also refer to the content itself, what's included in there. So if I start with something like this, so if we were in class, I always ask similarly, hey, how do we know what app this is? And the obvious answer is, well, it says notes right here, which is very true. But then if we break it down a little bit further, right, well, the color of where it says notes and the color here, we understand that that's a convention of the Notes app if you have the Notes app on your iPhone, right? So we know that this is the Notes app on the iPhone. And just to further highlight that point, this is the iPhone keyboard, right? The iPhone emojis, iPhone mobile carrier, the timestamp, the battery, the font that we're seeing over here, right? Just the general orientation. All of these things, layout and otherwise design, are visual markers and thus conventions of this app. And so if I ask you, who is the audience for your Notes app? Who's going to read your Notes app? It's you, right? You're not going to be sharing your Notes app with your friends. You're not going to be sharing the things that you're writing. It's a private space where you write down your $1 million ideas, where you write down, grocery lists, where you write down, lyrics that you like, whatever it is. You are the only person that has eyes on that app. It's meant to be private. However, sometimes you'll have an idea and say, I want to share that. I want to share that with the world. And so if we take this, for example, Taco Bell is the only place you can still get gas for under $3. If I wanted to take that line, that bar, and just share it with the world as is, not adding anything else, what would be the social media platform that would make the most sense? If you said Twitter, you are correct. It is Twitter. That's where I found this. This was a tweet. So this makes sense. And yeah, it makes sense because this is just how Twitter typically operates, right? Twitter, 140 characters. We have all of these kind of like people on Twitter that are Twitter comedians and writing little witticisms, writing jokes. And so if I have this idea, this like, this funny little quip, and I want to share it with the world, Twitter makes the most sense. And sure, I can put images on Twitter, there are videos on Twitter, edits, citizen journalism things. But at its core, what makes Twitter different from the rest of our social media platforms, our most popular social media platforms, is this right here, that I can literally just share this sentence and it's going to get attention. It's going to get traction, right? people are going to engage with it. If I decided to use something like this instead, why does this look weird? Why is this not appropriate to share something like my little joke over here? Well, first of all, what platform is it? It looks like we've got YouTube. Okay. So, YouTube, think about what YouTube is used for. Oftentimes, long form videos, right? We do have YouTube shorts on there, the kind of the Reels equivalent, the TikTok equivalent. But we're looking at a YouTube video right now. And this video is only 4 seconds long and appears to just like feature like a still image of Taco Bell menu items. And we have our joke, and it's over here where the title is at. Would this be the best way for me to share this? Is this going to reach my intended audiences? Absolutely not, right? Because it doesn't work. It's not following the conventions of a YouTube video that a creator has to do if they want a following, if they want people to pay attention to what I'm saying, to what I'm sharing, what this story is doing. And so the same thing applies to your work, right? I want us to think back again to this idea of the discourse community, right? And that discourse community, again, it's groups of people that have a shared special interest that's kind of linking them together, or a shared experience that they have. And so, yes, you could have other things that you'll talk about beyond just that shared interest, of course, right? But what links you together in the first place is that shared interest. And so the ones, that I talked about with 0493 are like, well, hey, I'm in a basketball league, and these are my friends that I play basketball with, right? And then I have another group of friends, and we are playing online video games together. And the two never really intersect with each other. And within each discourse community, you know, we have like a certain knowledge that we all have about the game of basketball in this realm, and then the video game that I'm playing, Fortnite, right? We all have this kind of knowledge, and we all have channels of communication that we use to talk with one another to keep the discourse going. So beyond the knowledge of the game, um, beyond having like inside jokes, there are like, well, maybe I have a group chat with my basketball friends, and then maybe these friends over here, I'm on Discord with them, and we chat about stuff. And there's always kind of like a learning curve. I didn't just like automatically get accepted into this community without doing any sort of work, right? I have to kind of put a little work in order to be accepted, in order to be welcomed, right? I have to gain the knowledge. I have to practice. I have to gain the skill set. I have to know what's going on in the community. I have to familiarize myself with the language that's used in order to appropriately assimilate into this culture, into this community. And so that's an important thing to think about with your stories. Because if you're really approaching this next phase of the project in the way that I'm asking you to do so, then you're considering, okay, if I were actually a YouTuber or I were actually a podcaster, who is it that is a discourse community? What discourse community is most likely to be interested in what I have to say? And so it has to do with, well, what topic is your literacy narrative covering, right? And where is that topic kind of discussed? Where are people like sharing stories about those things? Demographic stuff, age groups, college students. Am I aiming, for peers of mine, people my age? These are things to consider when you're in this next phase. I will ask you explicitly as you're going through the remediation process, taking your lit narrative and adapting it into a new medium. I'll ask you outright, who is your audience? Who is that discourse community that you're communicating with? And so thinking about stuff like this might clue us in to what genre we might want to work with. Maybe I will lean towards doing a podcast more so than doing a YouTube video, just because people are talking and about this subject that my literacy narrative is about. People are discussing that more so in that realm of podcasting, right? Rather than YouTube media. So we want to consider this. This might clue us into what we want to do with our projects in the next phase. Okay, so let's keep going with some examples of remediation. Jurassic Park, I was just watching it this weekend. This is one I feel like a lot of us are familiar with, but this is a good example of like the sort of Hollywood treatment, right? Of a book, an original source material, right? We have a book that's clearly very popular, New York Times bestseller, more than 4 million copies in print. And then what inevitably happens when something is successful, is making money, the big Hollywood machine wants to sink their teeth into it and make an adaptation, which, I still think is a great adaptation, a great movie, right? But things have to be changed in the process. Things are lost, things are gained, new directions happen, and ultimately the vision is a little bit different from what our original author likely intended. And so, if we're talking about this book, and some students have brought this to my attention, this book is brutal. They get into some very, very grotesque detail about the violence enacted on the characters in the story. And yeah, if you've seen Jurassic Park or in Jurassic World, any of them, yeah, there's definitely some violence in there, no doubt about it. But it pales in comparison to that which is communicated in the original story, in the original book. And so that's like a constant theme, right? That we always hear about, like, if you're in the know, the literary world or the film world, you're always hearing like rumors about new movies that are being greenlit. And there are certain stories, certain books that for years have just been considered unadaptable because the original source material just simply cannot translate into a visual media, especially a mainstream visual media, something that's a lot of money is going to be thrown at it, thrown towards the production in order to, of course, make that money back and then some. And some of these stories are just like the content is too adult or too taboo. Oftentimes the violence is just way too much, and it just doesn't seem right to try and adapt that if we're losing so much, if we're straying so far away from the original source material. And so this is something that we consider, right? If we break down the difference between reading a book and watching a movie and the sort of conventions of both and the audiences that are more likely to like choose one or the other, there's some clear-cut differences, right? I mean, for one, if we're talking about a book is intellectually stimulating, right? You're reading it, you're using your imagination, you're filling in the blank. You can't see these things, right? You're using your own brain, your own intellectual skills, your own critical thinking skills to let this story come to life, right? And so, yes, the author is giving descriptions and, giving you kind of like a foundation for that stuff. But the appeal of it is everything that's going on in our heads, right? Whereas the movie, it's the total opposite. It's a visual medium. It's visually stimulating. And so we're getting images thrown at us. We're getting music. We're getting special effects. We're getting actors, right? And so, yes, we're literally seeing this story that was just on paper, that was just on text, come to life. But it's hard to argue against the idea that this one is simply, it requires more intellect. And I'm not suggesting that we can't take a movie and analyze it the same way we could analyze a novel, right? Film as literature is like a whole, subsection of English studies, where they take movies and they consider, the symbolism and they break it down. So absolutely, I'm of course in favor of that. You guys should probably understand that by now. But if we're talking about just like general audiences, and we're talking about just like Hollywood production stuff that are just meant for mainstream audiences, they're not necessarily going there to be intellectually stimulated, right? They want to kick back, they want to relax, they want to see the story unfold before their eyes. They don't want to have to do the work, the critical thinking that is involved when you read something. That just automatically, you have to do that, right? I mean, think about this. When you get home from class, when you get home from work, and you put on a movie, you put on a TV show, you're likely going to go on your phone for a little bit, watch some videos, scroll, text, do whatever while the movie's on. And you're still kind of doing both, right? You can multitask and, still be paying attention and know what's going on in the story. Try to do that with a book. Try to be texting and scrolling on your phone, scrolling social media while you're reading a book. Can't be done. You have to focus. That has to be your main focus. And so, you know, if nothing else, right there is the proof that this is simply more intellectually stimulating. It stimulates the imagination more. So then, if you're thinking about audiences too, well, yeah, we can't put that violence on screen that we were just talking about exists in the book version of this. We want to make money off of this. And the original Jurassic Park, and I think all of them have just been PG-13 movies. And so, yeah, we get some violence on there. I saw these movies, when I was like 4 years old. So some of that stuff was, uh, certainly very alarming at the time, visually striking for me. But it's nothing compared to what I've heard the book gets into. And there's a reason for that, right? It's just simply not going to fly with these audiences. They're going to want to see the movie and take their families to see the movie, right? This is Steven Spielberg, one of the most famous filmmakers. And so, in that way, the book can be a little bit more divisive. Even when the movie isn't like rated G for general audience, it still has kind of just like, in most cases, wide appeal. Where if it's getting the theater release and we're seeing like the marketing behind it, the majority of those movies are meant for like, no matter what age group you fall into, you should be able to come and appreciate it if it interests you. If it's a story that you're interested in seeing. Of course, we all have our own taste in things. We're not going to love every movie and every story we see. But for a book, I mean, you have to be literate. You have to be able to read, and so you can already X out all little kids that don't know how to read a book, that don't know how to read a chapter book. So immediately, right off the bat, we're losing a whole segment of the population of which this story could reach. And so going back to our original definition, right? Why remediate? Share that story with audiences using different genres. And so I find this interesting too, that we even get like when a movie franchise, a remediated movie franchise, or whatever it is, gets popular, we get the merch, right? And so we get the clothing lines, we get the toy lines, right? So we get the Lego set over here that is remediating this very scene. And the reality is, yeah, this is based off of this scene from this movie. It probably didn't have a lot, or at least as much, to do with the book. The creators of this Lego set, right? Those people that are kind of translating this story or this scene into this medium, which is toys, toy building, however you want to describe it, although Legos have kind of been more for collectors nowadays than little kids. I doubt this is meant for little kids to play with. But when we're translating that, I'm sure they're thinking more so about this version of the story than they are about this. And the reality is, Michael Crichton, the original author, his vision was probably very different from both of these iterations, both these versions of the story. So, yes, when we have a movie that's adapted from a book, we're getting rid of characters, we're getting rid of plot points. We have to take this 300 plus page book and we have to condense it into 90 to 120 minutes. And how do we do that? Well, of course, we're going to have to sacrifice things. And we might even need to bring in new things as well, things that our audience is going to appreciate, things that give it that sort of more mass appeal. I was like asking this one. I asked the class, hey, what do you think of when I say the word gingerbread? And so people say, oh, Christmas or, cookies. More often than not, it's Shrek, which I find very fun. I find that to be very interesting. But gingerbread is this very, to me, it's like this intersection of innocence and horror. And if we trace back, according to Wikipedia, the origins of like the gingerbread man cookie, why it exists, where it first started, like it was either the Elizabethan or Victorian era England. The Queen during that time, around the holidays, would bake these cookies or have these cookies baked in the image of her dignitaries, right? So in the image of her knights, her ambassadors, her politicians, whoever they are, the people that work for her. And as a gesture of kindness, as a gesture of goodwill, you know, she would give them these cookies. Innocent enough, right? Maybe a little bit weird, maybe a little bizarre. A cookie that's made in your image. I wouldn't mind one. I think that sounds interesting. But yeah, kind of bizarre. But that's, as far as we can tell, where the gingerbread man began. And then through the process of remediation, it starts to have this sort of like snowball effect where other authors telling other versions of the story and incorporating gingerbread as like the main character or as just like a motif, a theme into the story, it begins to pick up elements of all these other stories that are informing our idea of what gingerbread is. And so if we think about Hansel and Gretel, okay, the Brothers Grimm tale, the two children that follow the breadcrumbs, um, or they're eventually lured into a witch's house who wants to eat them, wants to bake them, and the house is made of candy in some stories. In other stories, it's made of gingerbread. In some versions of the story, the witch, the woman herself, is called the gingerbread woman. Okay, so now we're getting some horror elements, like I just mentioned. Now we're not just getting like kind of like an innocent yet maybe a little bit bizarre gesture, but now we're picking up some horror elements along the way. And so then if we go to, if you've heard like the Mother Goose gingerbread boy stories from your youth, in that tale, it's like an older couple who doesn't, they don't have children of their own. So they bake a gingerbread boy. He comes to life so they could, raise him and as their child. And he wants nothing to do with them, right? He's out of there. He's running around. He's out of the house. The whole town is chasing after him. He wants nothing to do with these humans. I don't know if he's worried they're going to eat him or what he thinks their intentions are, but he wants nothing to do with them. And eventually, I think in the original story, he is led to a crossroads where he has to decide between meeting his demise via drowning in a river or being eaten by a fox. And both happen to him, actually. He both drowns, and then the fox comes and eats him up. Kind of a dark story for children, right? Kind of a dark tale to be sharing, with kids. So again, we have that horror element with this thing that feels like it should be kind of innocent, meant for children. And that eventually takes us to the Shrek telling, the Shrek use of the gingerbread boy, which is by far the most common one when I talk about this gingerbread lore. So we have the gingerbread boy in the scene with the villain, the main antagonist, Farquaad, and he's essentially being tortured. His legs are being broken off. Why then did the creators of this movie decide, let's make it the gingerbread boy who's being tortured in this scene? Well, for one, it makes the most sense because this is a kid's movie, and so he's a cookie. So breaking his legs off is going to be like a lot more palatable and less gruesome than, let's say, if we brought like the Three Little Pigs in and we started snapping their legs off trying to get information out of them, right? And you know how kids are. Kids love playing with their food. They like acting like, I remember there's like a Teddy Grahams commercial when I was a kid where the little boy's playing with the Teddy Grahams and then he's like dropping in the milk and pretending that he's going to eat them. And I mean, he does eat them, but he's pretending that they're alive and afraid of him. And so that feels like if it's a movie for kids, sure, then that's easier for them to stomach than another character being tortured. But at the same time, in the history of the Gingerbread Boy, he's always been kind of connected with these horror elements. He's always been kind of like a shit starter. He's always been somebody, right, that's running around and causing trouble, sometimes even undue harm. And so, yeah, that is also a reason why we might be able to say, yeah, hey, the gingerbread boy deserves it, right? He's kind of a pain in the ass. He deserves to have his legs snapped off and the gumdrop buttons as well. So I always find this very interesting, right? It's the intersection between innocence and horror, and it is remediation, right? It is remediation. I mean, this is another storybook from when I was a kid. They took the gingerbread man story and they made him the stinky cheese man instead, and they kind of just do like crude retellings of fairy tales. So, more examples. Comic strips being turned into TV shows. Sure, we get examples of that, right? Boondocks, the Peanuts, and whether it's we want to keep the wholesome nature of the first one or the political social satire from the first one, we want to make sure that when we do decide, okay, when we are bringing these characters to life, who are the actors that we want to choose? Right? How do we incorporate some of these other elements of a TV show, these conventions of a TV show, to bring this to life while still keeping the essence of the original characters, of the original story? Um, I'm not going to show this one because every time I try to do it on here on the recording, it just mutes it. And so it's just a waste of our time. But there is sampling in music, and sampling can be considered remediation. So the example that I've used for years now, and I'm questioning whether I should keep using it because one of our musicians um, that we're addressing is Diddy. And so this just to summarize, right, his song "I'll Be Missing You," which is um, sharing his story, sharing his personal struggle with the death of his friend Notorious B.I.G. Um, it's a sample of the Police song "Every Breath You Take." And so, yes, sonically, we can hear right off the bat. It's the same riff, and they kind of slowed it down in this version and added different drums. But it also feels like there was a very conscious decision to choose something that was melancholy, right? It's kind of like downtrodden, downbeat, and choosing that specific sample played into us telling a story that is sad, right? That's saying that you're missing your friend who's just been shot and killed. And so, yes, sonically, but then also like the story itself feels like it plays well into why they chose that sample. And you have that option if you are a musician, if you're someone that wants to explore remediating your story into some composition, some form of music, you have that option available to you. Other ones, right, when it's not always book to movie or video game to movie, sometimes we get the reverse, right, where it's like video game to book or movie to book. And so that's for instead of us needing to take something that is like so detailed, so thorough, like that which we see in a book, and condensing it into a movie, into a 2 hour long movie. Sometimes fans want more, right? They want to expand upon it. They want more characters, more plot, more from the universe, and so we see examples like that. And then this is my silly little example as well, where emojis, even though this isn't an official emoji, I wish it were, but emojis, they're not even safe from the Hollywood treatment. They get the emoji movie, and yeah, since we said emojis are communication, they tell a story depending on, you know, what these emojis signify to you. They're not even safe from the Hollywood machine. So those are my examples of remediation. Let's go back to our Blackboard page. So I've also posted this article, and this article gets into remediation even further. It talks about the book Johnny Got His Gun, which is a World War One book where a soldier is injured in battle beyond injured like beyond belief. I mean, he's a shell of his former self. His arms and legs are blown off. His face is blown off, and yet he still is alive. And he struggles to communicate because he doesn't have a mouth and he doesn't have eyes and he doesn't have ears. And it's a very, very sad book. We had to read it in high school, but it got remediated into a movie in 1971 and then was used as the basis for the Metallica song One. So, any metalheads out there, if you know that Metallica song One, It's a very popular Metallica song. Um, that's the music video for that song, and really the entire premise is based off of this book, Johnny Got His Gun. So feel free to read that article, and that kind of just gets into some more detail about remediation. Um, so then let's go to our writing project one um, assignment sheet. Let's see, where are we at here? Nice. Boom. Okay, cool. So this is the assignment sheet for writing project one. And going through it, I know that we're still kind of like working on the literacy narrative. But again, I think it's good to maybe know just like full transparency, what we're going to be doing with this literacy narrative, why we call writing project one literacy narrative 2.0, and what we're going to do when we gear up for the next phase of the project. So you just finished your literacy narrative. For the first major writing project, you're going to adapt it now into another form, another medium. Most popular options, podcast, right? Podcast is the easiest one to edit. It's the easiest to like record as well when you compare it to a video. There's just less you have to do. So the majority of the time, students elect to do a podcast. Second most popular certainly is like a YouTube style video. And I don't mean like a short film. Short films are very hard to pull off and often require a lot of bodies. So instead, I'm thinking things like a vlog or like a video essay. This is what I mean. This is the kind of project that I'm encouraging you to consider when I say a video, not a short film or not an animated film either. Even just doing 30 seconds of that tends to be very, very hard to accomplish for an entire semester, let alone the few weeks that you have to complete this assignment. So, podcasts and videos are the most popular, and certainly social media accounts are popular as well. And so I allow those projects too, taking your story and adapting it into, you know, a TikTok account or an Instagram account, a Twitter account, whatever it is, right? Those are popular options that are available to you. And really, I'll sign off on a majority of ideas as long as it's not just words on a paper, right? Words in a Word document, not just another Google Doc. Because for this to be considered remediation, we need to literally explore a new form of media. And so, since your literacy narrative is just a story in a Word document, you can't just remediate it, let's say, into a poem that exists still as like a Word document. The only exceptions I would give would be like if you wanted to make something like a zine, that's still, I guess, like text on paper, but then I'm getting like a physical copy, and there's opportunities to like include photography and imagery and graphic design in there. But the tough part about that is I might require it to be a physical copy, and some of us are online only. So if that is of interest to you, like the zine idea, then maybe reach out to me and let's talk. You can reach out anyway if you want to run through ideas with me. But yeah, just make sure that whatever you're exploring is in fact a new medium that simply isn't just text on a page or text in a Word document. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, hell, I don't know how to edit videos. I don't know how to edit a podcast. What am I going to do here? We're going to walk through tutorials of these software options, editing applications, CapCut for video, and then Riverside is the podcast editing software where it allows you to record, edit, upload all in the same space, add music, all using the same editing platform. So I'm going to do demonstrations of that. I have videos that I'll post likely next week that are just tutorials explaining how to use these softwares. So it should be pretty straight. It's meant to be user friendly. Okay, so even if you're going into this and you don't know what the hell you're doing, I understand that. That's where a majority of us are at, and I'm not expecting you to be this perfectionist. Like, this isn't a filmmaking class. This is not a graphic design class. I'm not expecting that your work is going to be perfect, but we'll make sure that you know the basics and you can still churn out, a solid project. You'll also write a short reflection. I have a reflection outline document that I will post eventually that just gives you some questions to consider for writing that part of your reflection. But your reflection is meant to just kind of like take me through that creative process of remediating your story from literacy narrative to now whatever it's being turned into. You walk me through that process and take me through that. So you might be asking yourself, well, how do we convert? Like, what's the conversion rate of 800 words um, in a Word document that was my literacy narrative? How do I convert that to like X amount of minutes in a video or in a podcast? Well, here is my conversion chart. So if it's a podcast, these are all minimums. It needs to be at least 8 minutes, which typically students have no issue getting. We even if you don't, even if you've never recorded yourself before, you'll find that it's easier to talk about something than you might have anticipated. So minimum 8 minutes for a podcast. If it's a YouTube video, like a video essay or a vlog, it should be at least 4 minutes. Now with the social media ones, these social media accounts, since I'm not, we know that for something to be an Instagram post, it could literally just be an image, right? So instead of me saying, hey, make an Instagram post, a single Instagram post that's a remediation of this 800-word story, I asked for multiple different posts in a fully published account. Okay, so yes, you do need to make a brand new account dedicated to this project, dedicated to this class. So you can't use personal accounts, no personal social media accounts, and you have to publish the full thing. Because I don't get the full picture unless I get to see a profile picture and a bio and like how you're using music and captions in the telling of all this. Those are conventions. Those are conventions of these social media sites. And so, yeah, I do need you to publish the full thing. Now, if you're worried, oh man, I don't want my friends to see this, I don't want, this to be public, you can still keep it private. And I have English composition TikTok pages and Instagram, or a TikTok page and an Instagram page, that I'll just ask you to share it with that page. Give me access. So let me follow whatever it takes, that account. Let me follow the account. And that way you can keep it private. You don't have to worry about it like, going public or anything and anyone seeing it. But if it's a TikTok account, I ask for 5 posts. Instagram, I ask for 7 to 8 posts. Twitter, I ask for 15 posts. Right? Since we know Twitter can just be like a sentence, 15, so a little more. If you're doing a comic strip, and so again, my people who don't know how to draw, you still have the option of doing a comic strip. We're going to check out Canva. If you've ever explored Canva before, it's a great, very simple graphic design website. Once you see it, I promise you'll never go back to using PowerPoint, because they have all these templates that make your work look good. And the same thing for a comic strip. So with the comic strip stuff, I asked for 3 to 4 pages or 15 individual panels, right? We know a comic strip has different panels that the story is told through. So I asked for at least 15 different panels if you choose to do a comic strip. All right, so you'll write your reflection, which has to be 700 words. We'll talk about submitting all this stuff when we get to that part of the semester. But here's my sort of like step-by-step thing. Again, I think it always makes sense to choose a genre you're interested in first and then go from there. Here's the grading criteria. Feel free to take a look at that. Like I said, next week we're going to be focused all on genre conventions. That is going to be the bulk of our conversation about genre conventions. And that is the assignment sheet, 30,000-foot view of the assignment. Okay, so we've discussed, get out of here, remediation article, take a look at that. We discussed the assignment sheet for Literacy Narrative 2.0, aka Writing Project 1. Now there's one more thing that I'm asking us to complete this week. So instead of a discussion board, there's no discussion board this week, I'm asking for you to do this content creator analysis. So if we pull that up, here's what I'm asking for with the content creator analysis. So um, over the course of the next week, start brainstorming ideas, things that you might want to do for this project, specifically like what genre you might want to work with. Now, once you've committed to that, or at least have an idea, I want you to then find a professional creator in that space to do this little write up for. So if you want to do a podcast, then I'm asking you for this assignment, for the content creator analysis assignment, right? This is separate from writing project one, a separate assignment. But for this assignment, you'll find a professional podcaster then if you want to do a podcast. Or if you want to do a YouTube video, you'll find a professional YouTuber. If you want to do a TikTok, you'll find a professional TikToker. You get the idea, right? But you'll answer these 5 questions after you watch some of their videos or you listen to an episode or two, and you'll just answer these questions for me, right? So as a consumer of this media, what appeals to you about it? What works well with the content? What makes the creator successful in their purpose? Number 2, what's the text's subgenre? Now we've kind of started this before. Think back again to like the NBA tweet where we were talking about, yeah, it isn't just a tweet, right? The tweet is the genre, but if we think about subgenre, we start dissecting it even more. It's an NBA tweet, it's sports media, it's ESPN, right? There are ways that we could describe it a little bit further that make it more detailed. Okay, so think about that with the person whose content you are analyzing. Number 3, who do you think the intended audience is? Do you believe you are a part of this discourse community? Why or why not? Number 4, start listing off some of those conventions or some of those markers. So thinking about things like structure, timing, colors, music, logos, mood, any creative decisions that the author has made that are indicating that they are working within this specific genre. And then finally, how do you think the text can influence your writing project one? What are some things you think are worth replicating in your own work? So I am asking for this to be a Word document. You're going to shoot for 250 to 300 words, and we've got a little over a week, right? So this is due Wednesday, October 15th at midnight. So a little over a week, but that's what we're doing this week instead of a discussion board. And of course, in addition to you brainstorming and beginning to work on your writing project one once you finish your lit narrative. Okay, so don't forget those lit narratives are due Wednesday night. Um, I'm looking forward to reading them. Looking forward to seeing what you guys have written. My comments, my feedback is typically about next phase of the project. So anticipate the feedback you receive on that literacy narrative to be more so about, okay, great. Now that you've done this, let's think about next steps. Let's think about who's your audience, where are people talking about this sort of stuff, where are they sharing their stories, and I'll offer my sort of suggestions about, yeah, this actually might work well as a podcast, or this might work well as a TikTok, whatever it is. But anticipate the comments to be about that. Um, all right. So I think that pretty much covers it. I thought there was one more thing that I'm forgetting. Well, of course, reach out to me if you have any questions. All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to what you guys come up with. I'm available to speak if you need any sort of help at all. Please reach out. All right. Have a good week.